guys, so today I wanted to talk about how I track reading in my bullet journals, and I thought I would show you sort of a progression over time for how I track. Now, one thing to note is I do use Goodreads to sort of keep an overall tracking, like sort of an overall record of what I've read, but in my bullet journals, I tend to have a pretty simple, sort of straightforward way that I track. So let's get started. So I started my first bullet journal in April of 2016, and I did not immediately start tracking reading because even though I love to read, it's not something that I actually really tracked that much aside from, for example, with Goodreads. But as I was going, I was realizing that with everything that I was putting in my bullet journal, it would be nice to have sort of a record of the things I read during a given month. So my first reading tracker, I started actually in May, so my second month of bullet journaling, and I was still I'm still learning hand lettering, so you can see this is not very great. It was my second month. But so I started with hand lettering and a quote, banners, I had all kinds of stuff going on, and one of the things that I actually initially did was I made categories. So I had books that I wanted to finish that month and books that I wanted to just work on, and I actually, for these two, put the page I wanted to read up to. Now, one thing you'll notice is that I finished 3 books and migrated the other 4. But this was sort of the first sort of iteration of my reading tracker, and it really hasn't changed a whole lot. I do have the day I started tracking my reading goals and the day that I finished, so basically the end of the month. And you'll see that May has 31 days, but I finished on the 30th because I probably didn't read on the 31st, for example. So that was in May. And what I also did as part of this, and you'll see this was my first aborted reading challenge tracker. I did not like the setup. The lettering was just super wonky, and you can tell here I actually lettered over it. By seeking and blundering we learn, to kind of remind myself, you know what, it's okay, turn the page, like move on, do a new one. So this was my first tracker for the challenge because I wanted to do 33 books in 33 weeks since that was when I had started in May. And let's see, I'm actually going to flip ahead. So once I realized that I didn't like how this was set up, because I had the week, which book it was, so book 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, the name of the book, and when I started and finished it. So in the second, where are you, sir? Here you are. So the second iteration that I had was simplified. So I condensed the heading up here, and then I just had the book number, so 1 through 13 was in here, the week I read it in, or the week I finished it actually, the title, the author, last name only, and the rating, which it's my rating, so you'll notice some of the things that I've written are like not helpful for anybody except for me kind of thing. And that's just to remind me when I go back and look at this, like, oh, did I like it? What did I think of it? Whatever. So something super short there. So this was my second challenge tracker, and you'll see that I did keep doing monthly level ones. So this one, I actually had English, French, Spanish, and Italian, and an extra one that I didn't have space in the English section. And you'll see that I cross off when I finish reading the book and migrate if I don't finish it. If I started it, I'll do a half tick and then migrate that way. And again, I had started May 31st, that was why I actually bumped this to June. I finished my goal, so I wanted to do 5 books for that month. So I said I finished my goal on the 15th, and I finished the reading for this particular one before I migrated it on the 25th of June. So for July, I actually did away with the sections, and you'll see these I had on here. They were things I wanted to read that I did not even start. So this one, I started doing this little section up here. So I have my goal is 4 books for the month. Goal met, and it wasn't quite, so I wrote down it was only 2.5 books. I started July 3rd, and I didn't actually write down when I finished. I believe I was traveling at the end of July, which could be why I did that. And I had extra space, so I actually added in a quote, which is something that I kind of still do. So this was in my first bullet journal, and one thing that I also had at the beginning was kind of a TBR list, so things that I wanted to read. So I had it separated into classics, fiction, and then nonfiction books. And if you can tell, I don't actually know how easy it is to see, this check mark here is how I migrate big collections so that I know, because I kind of jump around when I migrate to a new journal or, you know, whatever. And so I'll do a check mark so that I know I've done that section. And what I actually did at the end of July when I was moving into a new bullet journal, I actually set up a collection bullet journal, because I have a lot of books that I would like to read in addition to other things. But one of the main things that I did this was for my books. And so what I basically did is I created more sections in here. And I gave each section essentially a full page. So I have nonfiction books, books in Italian, books in Spanish, books in French, classics, and these I actually do group on the left page. I group by author. So you'll see the author and then I indent for their works, and on the right are sort of standalone or things that I kind of added on after. Young adult fiction, again, done by series, since I tend to read series for young adult stuff. I've got novels. Again, here I had Rainbow Rowell. I basically wanted to read her entire canon, and so I did an indent so that I had all of her books grouped together. Then fiction series, so again, fiction series, and I number them so that I kind of keep track of where I am. I believe now we get, yep, so that's movies. So then later, after I had already set up other pages, I went back and I added travel and started stop putting them in the nonfiction section, because these are like travel logs, travel memoirs, that sort of thing, and it's a subgenre that I really like. So I gave it its own little spread. And the latest one I have in here is for fantasy books, and a lot of this is because I was running out of room on other spreads and I wanted to give it its own section, because I do like reading fantasy, steampunk, like that kind of stuff. So that is what I actually did after my first bullet journal. So I no longer, when I moved into my second bullet journal, I no longer had any book lists in the front, because I don't necessarily get to them and I want to have a long like running list. And so I sort of just dedicated a section in my collection bullet journal to that. But what I did do is I set up another tracker for my 2016 reading challenge, and I didn't migrate anything. I just started from the next one. So in the first bullet journal I went to 13, so here I started with 14 because I didn't want to recopy it, but I also didn't want to have to flip back to a different journal to fill it in. So, and you'll see that it was a good thing I didn't copy, because I got all the way down to the bottom there. And this is actually not even the complete list, because I had read other things earlier in the year that were not on here, but this is what I read as part of this particular challenge. So what I have in here is also started mid-May, so I just transferred that over, and then I reached my goal on 7th of November. So I just kind of noted that, but I kept tracking even after that. Then we have my August tracker. So you'll see that it's basically the same. I have the goal met, started, and finished. So if I met the goal, I just write the date in. If I don't, I just write how many books I read that month. And then when I have extra space, once again, I did a quote. So I try to do quotes related to reading, obviously, at least obvious in my brain. So here, same thing. So this one I wanted to read 5 books. I met it the 17th of September, but when I finished it, I had read more. So I actually wrote in parentheses how many books I read total that month. And you'll see I still do, and I marked here, this was actually volumes 2 and 3. I think because I'd already done the quote and I ended up reading more and I ran out of room. So I just marked that it was actually 2 books, so that counted. And migrating books that I did not finish. So October, you'll see October, I was super busy with school and work, so I didn't read very much. So I had a much larger quote than I normally would. Pretty much the same otherwise. And this one actually noted, no, I didn't meet my goal, and I read 3 books instead of 4. Let's see. November was a good one. I actually had pre-washied the bottom of the page, and I ended up reading a ton in November. You'll see I read 10 books, and I do have some on here that I migrated, that I started and migrated. So for example, these 2 here, the Anna Karenina and Heart of Darkness, I was actually reading through Serial Reader, which gives you issues every day. So I'll sometimes read ahead, but a lot of times I'll keep them. So they'll be on my reading goals list for months, and I'll just keep migrating them, even though I am working at them. It's just that I haven't finished them. So what I actually ended up having to do was finishing my reading goals at the end. This was the end of a bullet journal and I just need a little bit more space. So I just kind of flipped to the next page and made sort of a continuation of that particular one. But I learned my lesson and I stopped doing quotes or washi until I was like absolutely finished with the reading goals, because sometimes I run out of space. So that was in bullet journal number 2. Here we have my last one. So this is bullet journal number 3. And this was actually in December. So it was the end of the month. So I had my goal, I was getting really close, and I sort of wanted to challenge myself to see if I could actually hit 52 for 2016. I finished and I wrote down that I actually met my goal in November, because I probably preset this up and then read a bunch in November, and so I had to mark that. And so I wrote down again how many books I read in the month, have my list with my migrations, and I have at the bottom here, I don't know if you guys can see that, is a little note with 2016 total was actually 62 books. And so that was sort of how I wrapped out the year. But I did not actually migrate anything that I had on here. I actually went back and added it into my full spread. Whoops, somewhere, there where my spread is. Into my full spread here, so that I didn't have to set up a brand new challenge spread. Okay, so that was for 2016. So what I did for 2017 is I had already, in 2016, I decided that I wanted to do another reading challenge for 2017. And so I actually went ahead and I set up a spread in here, and I gave myself a full spread, and I wanted to do 52 books in 52 weeks. And actually it is currently mid-May and I am on track. I'm at 27 books for the year so far, and that's halfway through, a little bit over halfway through, and we're only up to week 20. So doing pretty well. And again, I kept basically the same thing. So I had what number book I'm on, the week that I finished it, the title, author, and then my like random rating method. And so basically I just keep a bookmark in here, and whenever I finish a book on my monthly spread, I go ahead and I transfer it over here, so that as I move through bullet journals, I don't have to keep redoing the spread. And again, mine are super simple because I don't really need to know like how many chapters I've read or whatever. I really would only do sort of that kind of detailed tracking for books for school or for work. But for reading for fun, I just kind of want to know globally what I've done, which is why my spread is so minimalistic here. So then we have, oops, let's see, I believe this is January. And so January, I went kind of minimal, and I learned my lesson. I did not actually washi here, but even when I finished, I didn't go back and washi. I probably just forgot. So I have my goal was 4 to 5 books. My goal was met on the 22nd of January, 4 books, and I continued reading until the end of the month, and I hit 7 books. So I did write down here that my 2017 goal was 52, so that I kind of just had that in mind. And what I started doing in January is I actually started writing in the date that I finished the book, which is kind of helpful for me. It's just something I like to sort of look back and see, because I don't necessarily finish them in order. So this was just a little quick thing that I could write down when I finished the book. As I was putting it into Goodreads, I just write down when I finished, like what date I finished the book, so that I can look back on that later. And also this helps me if I don't fill in my big tracker immediately, I can go back and look at the date and know what week it was. I believe that's actually why I started doing it, because I was looking at these and I was like, oh man, I don't remember what week I finished this. So here I have that information, easy peasy. All right, so now, let's see, this is February. So February, pretty much the same. I still do this where I have the total number for the month and versus my goal. And then I also sometimes will do the last name of the author, again, with the date that I actually finished the book. Let's see. This is something that I did. I haven't included any sort of reading collections that I had to do for like work or school or anything like that, except for this one, because this was actually one that I got from my literature classes that are novels that I would like to read. And I actually, so for example, I'm actually starting this one right now. I'm currently working on it, and I have actually read both of these, which, let me grab my pen and go ahead and just cross those and a partial. So these were things that I wanted to actually read in terms of like reading for fun. So I just made a list here while I was in class. I just kept writing down the books that the teacher was talking about. So that's why I included him. So every once in a while I will do that, and not necessarily, this is one that I haven't actually migrated into my collection bullet journal because I want to read them, but they're not necessarily like long-term. You know, it's something I'll come back to, but he was fine just living in my bullet journal. Anyway, there's a long explanation for that. So March. So you can see for March that I did away with the boxes at this point, and I was just doing the dots. So it's actually a little bit easier for me to see what I've migrated and what I've crossed off. I didn't have as many books here. I also overall stopped doing the authors because for a lot of them I just kind of knew, but this one I finished, and so I wanted to have it to write down in my tracker. But I had a lot of extra room, so again I did a quote on the bottom there. So that is March, which brings us up to my current bullet journal. Now, once again, I have no book collections set up in the beginning of this bullet journal. I basically just do my my monthly reading goals. And this one, you can see that I didn't actually write the total because I had 4 books and that was all I read. So it was just, that was my goal. I met my goal, so I don't need to write down how many books I read over that. I'm still doing the dates on the bottom. And this one actually was one that I finished and couldn't remember when, so I had an approximate sign on that, which is why I date them, because I forget. And so now we are at this month. And one of the things that I stopped doing over time, so I used to try and plan out, these were the books that I wanted to read for the month. And what I do now is I wait until I start a book. Because there's so many books out there that I want to read, and sometimes I get inspired to read a completely different book, so I don't even start it. So then I have this long list with boxes that aren't even checked at all, or nothing that's migrated because I just never started the book. And so in order to save the space, especially for the months when I actually do read a lot, I only will put on books here that I have started reading in some way, shape, or form. And that's something that is different between the months. But overall, my tracker is really simple. I basically just do month level and then the year level for my challenge. And I also do use Goodreads. I know there's a bunch of other people out there who track like how many pages they read a day and the reading time and all that kind of stuff. So if you are looking for that kind of stuff, definitely check out some of the Bookstagram folks on Instagram because they have some amazing trackers out there. But if you're looking for something that's a little bit more minimalist, this is kind of what I do. So yeah, I hope this was at least a little bit helpful for you guys. I thought it might be interesting to see sort of the evolution of my reading trackers over time because it is something I've done almost since the beginning of my bullet journals. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them below and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.